Are your money habits quietly sabotaging your golden years? Today, we are shining a spotlight on the sneaky pitfalls that can turn a dream retirement into a financial headache. You're listening to The Next Chapter Living, planning your retirement story with our host, Stephen Sabo. Stephen is a financial advisor with Executive Financial Group, and you can learn more at executivefinancialgroup.com. Stephen, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you. I'm sitting here just trying to get my day started and, thinking about some of the different topics and things like that we're going to talk about today that can kind of hinder or derail, if you want to say, somebody's retirement.
And we dove into one particular one, which is its own standalone topic, spaving, on a previous episode. So if you haven't listened to that, be sure to go back and give that a listen. But yes, talking about retirement roadblocks. I think we all like to think that retirement is just going to be this smooth road, that we've worked really hard, we get to it, and now, we cross that dotted line and it's the yellow brick road, if you will. It's just a smooth sailing, but that's not always the case. And oftentimes we're the reason it's not the case. It's, we've done things that have blocked our own success. So I wanted to dive into those today. Talk to me about some of the stuff that you're seeing and things that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many out there. And like you said, I think a lot of people go into this and, not necessarily that they think that things are just going to be easy and there's nothing to worry about. But I think it's something that people just don't want to face or look at, right? These things are, it's like going to the dentist or going to the doctor. Nobody wants to be told that they're, what they're doing every day is actually not what they should be doing. And so,
right.
I think that some of these things, they sneak up on you, but it's important to make sure that we aren't doing things like one of them would be, maybe not having a spending plan, right? Not knowing how you're going to draw income or something like that from your retirement. One of the very first things that we do, and I know that I preach it and I talk about it consistently, having a budget or a spending plan like we talked about on the last episode there. Because a lot of people go into retirement and say, well, I have Social Security and I'll just pull money as I need it, or I'll pull money whenever, without really coming up with an idea of what that looks like. And here's how much that I have, and here's how much that I need, and what happens if the market falls and I'm invested in the market and I'm drawing this money, or, what if I don't really have a plan and all of a sudden now I've drawn down my accounts and it's looking kind of bleak. There's a lot of pitfalls, right, that you can run into in retirement. And again, we talked about this a little bit, but it's a long-term game for a lot of people. You might be in it for 20 or 30 years. And so not having a spending plan, that's why it's one of the first things that we talk about, because if you do not, you can really find yourself in trouble. It might be okay for the first 10 years, but then you might get a little bit older and you realize, hey, you know what? I need some help around the house, or I need help with my health care or something like that. And now you don't have enough money to pay for those. That's never a good thing to run into in retirement, So having that spending plan, coming up with that and saying, okay, here's how much that I need to pay my bills, and here's how much I'm going to need to draw from my investments, and how are we going to do this? What can we do? What tools, accounts, different investments can we use to set that up? So that's a really big one, is having a spending plan.
In addition to that spending plan, in terms of knowing where your income's coming in, it also matters how and when you draw from certain accounts. And I think people get lost on that as well. They go, oh, I've got my 401k and I've got my Social Security, and, I might have an annuity and I'll just draw whenever, wherever. But that can be detrimental too.
Absolutely. And it happened with a client of ours. He came to us, and whenever we first sat down with him, we talked about doing a full retirement plan. And this is kind of how we work, and this is how we do things. And, it ended up that he moved some accounts to us, and he was still working at the time. And whenever he finally decided to retire, he said, you know what, I'm going to kind of keep my 401k and I'll manage it and I'll do these things. And hey, that's fine. We can't push you or anything like that. But, it created a problem in that in 2022, he was taking money out of his 401k account. He rolled it to an IRA, but he was taking it out of there and the markets were falling. And, we had a conversation the one day and he kind of explained it to me, because I did not know that he was taking money out of that account, because we never, again, we usually sit down and we look at all these things and we'll come up with a plan for him. and he didn't let us know that he was taking money out of those accounts. And I said, here's the reason that we set this portion of it up for you was because in retirement, if you're drawing money out of something that's going down, you're compounding that. And,
Mm-hmm.
so we had set something up that wasn't going to be losing money. It was kind of a fixed investment. And it was for those times specifically. And I said, hey,
Mm-hmm.
look, this is why we did this. And this is why we kind of like to coordinate with people on these things, because we didn't know that you were doing that and you were making it worse for yourself. And he said, oh, I wish I would have called you. I didn't realize. And, I knew that it was, kind of making my market account worse by taking this money out, but I didn't realize that I could draw money from here. And we said, yeah, and that's why we set it up that way. And so, when and how you take the money out of places can certainly have a big effect in your retirement plan.
And I would venture to say after that story, not telling the full story to your financial advisor would be a retirement roadblock that you don't want to self-impose.
Absolutely, it is. I know that some people like to keep their lives private, or they don't want you to know because they think that you're going to judge them on what they're doing or how they're doing it or why they did something. And look, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to whatever you do outside of here. It doesn't really matter to me, but it's like going to a doctor. If I
Mm.
don't know things about you and I prescribe my solution to you, it might be counteracting with something else that you're doing already.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be very bad. It's like if you had two different doctors and you didn't tell one that the other one was prescribing you a medicine and then they prescribed you one and they were, clashing, that can be
Mm-hmm.
deadly. And
Right.
so, it can be quote unquote deadly for your financial plan to be able to do those things. And so we want to know as much about you. I want to know all these things. Look, I'm not here to judge. I make mistakes, I do things, but I need to know. In order for me to help you the best, I need to know these things. And so, that's a great point.
I know another retirement roadblock that we talk about, but people are quick to forget, and that's updating beneficiaries. It's
hmm
so easy to just, go about your day to day. Maybe you're doing your annual review, but you forget that part. Talk to me about why that can be so detrimental.
Yeah, that's a really big thing. And it's something that is so simple. Like you said, hey, every time that we're having a little bit of a review, let's sit down. Who are your beneficiaries? Are they still people that you want? Has anybody died? Has somebody gotten divorced? What is going on with these things? Because that is something that is so simple, but can end up costing you thousands of dollars whenever you go if
Mm.
you don't have your beneficiary set up correctly to go to who you want, because then it can become something that you're dealing with in your estate. And a lot of what we do is try and keep things out of people's estate. We don't want them to have to go into these things without a plan, because what happens whenever you do that? An attorney sees that and they say, hey, look, this is an opportunity to start billing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sitting here and picking on attorneys and saying that, they're all bad people and they're looking to take advantage of you. But at the end of the day, that's typically how they charge and that's how
Mm-hmm.
things go. So if you're searching for stuff or if you have to, fight with multiple different beneficiaries and things like that because you haven't set them up correctly, then, a lot of the times they're going to stay out of it and they say, hey, look, you figure it out and, the estate stays open and we're going to continue to bill until you get it figured out. And so, that can cost you thousands of dollars after you go. It can cost your beneficiaries a lot of money. And so, that is something that is so simple to sit down and say, hey, look, this account, you don't have anything listed. Who do you want? Let's talk about it. You have these things in your will, but what do you want done with this account? A lot of
Mm.
the times we tell people, and it's tough. We have situations where clients, maybe it's two separate marriages and they don't know what to do because there's two different sets of kids. And, how do we
Mm.
handle this? And one person had a little bit more money than the other one, but we want everybody to be equal. And, so it is difficult and I understand it, but we try and tell people all the time, hey, look, this is really, really important. Most of the time, it doesn't take that long to deal with, but it can cost you in the end. And, so beneficiaries is a very big one. We want to sit down at least annually and take a look at that. Has anything changed? Has anybody, passed? Is anybody divorced? What's going on? And a lot of times it's, hey, everything's good to go. Let's leave them how they are. But we want to know before it's too late, because once something happens, sometimes you can't change that. And then you're stuck with what you have. So
I feel like the biggest wild card that retirees or those nearing retirement are facing is healthcare. It's the unknown. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
earlier in the show
Mm-hmm.
that appointment with the doctor that gives results that were unexpected.
Yeah.
Certainly, there are some things in life that we don't have any control over it, but we can plan for it in the event that it happens.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the importance of planning for the unknown in terms of healthcare,
Yes.
because it's a big one.
Healthcare is a very big one. And unfortunately, it's gotten worse over the years for people. I know that me, just recently, I got married back in October. And, as a business owner, I didn't have a workplace plan or anything like that. So I go out on my own and I purchase healthcare. And, obviously, I want to make sure that I'm taken care of. I try and keep myself healthy, but we never know. We can plan for it. And so,
Mhm.
you want to have good healthcare, and it's getting increasingly more expensive. And I thought, well, my wife, she works, she has healthcare through her work. I'll get on hers. Well, it ended up that for the time being, I stayed separate than hers because hers was going to be much more expensive adding me on there than just leaving
Wow.
me on my own. And so we just sat down with a client and went through this whole plan. And we ended up having to, we did some Roth conversions and we did some things because his healthcare, his wife had cancer. And so,
Mhm.
healthcare to them is very important. She needs it. And, we want to make sure that they have it. But whenever he retired, he couldn't take his healthcare with him. And, they got quotes at first and it ended up being almost double what they were expecting. And so, that can really eat into your budget whenever all of a sudden you're looking at something and they're saying, well, instead of, we thought it was going to be maybe $1,100 a month and we were looking at closer to, $2,100 a month for healthcare. That's insane. And
That's
so, we
nuts.
ended up working with the client and and it had to do with keeping their income lower. And so we had to make some adjustments to their plan and say, hey, look, all you have right now are taxable investments. Every dime that comes out of them is going to be taxable. And we had to create some tax-free investments so that they could take the same amount of money out in retirement. Say it was going to be $80,000. I'm just making up numbers, but
Mhm.
we took it in a way that maybe only 40 of it was going to be taxable and the other 40 came and it was going to be tax free so that they could stay under a threshold so that they were able to get, a subsidy on their health care so that it was a little bit more affordable to them. But, healthcare is one of those things. Unfortunately, I don't know that we're ever going to have a fix that everybody in this country likes.
Mhm.
There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, if you will, and everybody has an opinion. But, it's something that is so important that we need to take a look at because it can get it very expensive very quickly. So healthcare is one of those things where that can be tough. You don't quite always know why it's costing you as much as it is, but,
Mhm.
you have to plan for it. So
And that story makes me, I know you're very humble and won't call attention to it, but that reminds me about why the importance of having a financial advisor
that's right.
is because you have an outside perspective where that gentleman in the situation when he's looking at his wife being sick, he's carrying an emotional load and
Yeah,
isn't necessarily looking at it that, oh, this money is taxable and that's pushing up my income and that's affecting this. And you're able to take that 30,000-foot view
that's right.
and take the emotion out of it and just look at things from a practical standpoint. Sadly, only about 40% of Americans use a financial advisor.
Yeah.
So I will ask you, what do you say to those that are self managing, that have this maybe perhaps a negative idea that a financial advisor is only out for themselves?
Yeah. It's unfortunate that the industry, I guess, at large has created that. I mean, it's not financial advising isn't the only one. A lot of people go about doing things on their own because they say, oh, I'm getting ripped off or this person or
Hmm.
that, and unfortunately, that's where we are with this type of industry. But I can't stress enough to people how important it is, even just to have somebody to bounce your ideas off of. You might have the right idea, you might be on the right track, but one little thing and you could derail your whole plan. And so,
Hmm.
it really, in my opinion, it really is important. I could cut my own hair. Is it actually going to look good? Probably not, So I go and I have somebody do it for me, right?
Right.
But in financial planning, there's just not only that, there's so many nuances to it. Like I said, that healthcare piece was just a small portion,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that your income is coming in a certain way so that you don't have to pay more in your Medicare, or that your Social Security, if you're collecting Social Security before full retirement age, that you get the full amount and it's not taken away because you're earning too much money. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many little things that people don't realize. And, it's not their job to. They spent the last 30 or 40 years doing something completely different. Why would they know about these things? It's not like they're blasting it out there on the TV saying, hey, look, if you spend too much money in retirement, this is going to be taxed, or you're going to owe more on this, or there's just so many little nuances and taxes and things that they slip into these, seemingly everyday normal stuff that you don't really realize until it's too late. And a lot of the times, once it's done, it's too late, or it's going to cost you a whole heck of a lot to go back and try and unwind it. And so, you can go at it on your own. And, some people will say, well, hey, look, the accumulation part of it, all I'm doing is putting money away and I can pick these different investments to help it grow over time. That's a totally different ballgame than retirement. Accumulating money and the decumulation, or whatever you want to call it, the spending phase of it, where you are the paycheck, is a whole different ballgame. And there's a lot more to it than just putting the money away consistently each month and then turning it around and drawing it out. There's a lot of things that you can, traps, if you will, that you can kind of slip into and create problems for yourself in retirement if you don't have somebody on your side. And so it's important. You want to find somebody that's professional. You want to find somebody that you can trust and that has your interests at heart. And I look at this like, hey, you've worked really hard for what you have. Everybody's got to make a living. And I'm not knocking people in the industry that, I don't know, maybe I don't charge the lowest amount, or, whatever the case is. I'm not knocking anybody here, but you got to be able to do it in a way that makes your client feel comfortable and is fair to them. It's fair to you. And that's why we do things the way that we do it. And we want to show people up front, this is what you're paying for. Here's how much you're paying for it. And then you make the decision. If that's not something that you want to do, hey, I hope that you learned something from me. And I hope that everything is successful in your retirement. But at the end of the day, I really do think it's important. I'm not doing my own surgery. I'm not, cutting my own hair. There's certain things that I'm not going to do on my own. Financial planning is one of those things that I don't think that most people should be doing on their own.
If somebody's listening to this and realizing, you know what, I'm on this path and I'm trying to do it by myself and I may not be steering myself in the best direction, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, please. You can go to our website at executivefinancialgroup.com. You can sign up for a complimentary appointment there where a consultation, if you will, where we can meet and go over things. Give us a call. 724-283-2806 is our office number. Ask for Stephen. My wonderful sister will answer the phone. You can ask her if I'm available. You can find us on Facebook. You can find these episodes on any of the podcasting things out there, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, so there's a lot of avenues, but pick up the phone, shoot me an email, go to our website, give us a call, whatever it's going to be. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to sit down and see, can we come up with a plan that's going to give you the retirement that you've been dreaming of? And, knock on wood, I get a little superstitious, but I think we've done a great job at helping our clients. And I want to continue doing that. My dad's been doing it for about 40 years now, and it's my job and my sister's job to continue this on for another 40 years. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that it's a family office.
Yes.
And I wish people could see the video that goes along with it, because your heart and your passion for your clients really is so evident. And we can't always plan for life's roadblocks, whether it's inflation or unexpected health care, not having an emergency fund. There are things that pop up that are unexpected, but we can have a team beside us to walk us through it and make sure that we have the best plan in place to prepare for the unexpected. And if you're ready to write the next chapter in your story, again, you can head on over to executivefinancialgroup.com. executivefinancialgroup.com. Schedule that complimentary consultation with Steve and sit down, have a chat.
Yes.
There's no judgment, as you've said. You've seen it all, and you wouldn't go to the doctor. You wouldn't go try to do your own surgery.
Yes.
And so maybe it's a good idea to, at least have a second opinion on your portfolio status.
Yes. Let us be your financial surgeon.
I like that. There we go. The new tagline.
Yeah, that's right.
Financial surgeon. Mm-hmm. Well, Stephen, I always appreciate chatting with you and look forward to another one again soon.
Thank you, Alyssa. I appreciate it as well, and I can't wait.
The opinions expressed by Stephen Sabo and guests on this podcast are their own and do not reflect the opinions of this podcast station. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Past performance cannot be used as an indicator to determine future results. Any strategies mentioned may not be suitable for everyone. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. Before acting on any information mentioned, please consult with a qualified tax or investment advisor to determine if it is suitable for your specific situation. This program is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to subject covered. Investment advisory services offered through Virtue Capital Management, LLC, VCM, a registered investment advisor. VCM and Executive Financial Group are independent of each other. Pennsylvania Insurance License number 670429. Any guarantees mentioned are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company and may be subject to caps, restrictions, fees, and surrender charges as described in the annuity contract. Stephen Sabo and/or Executive Financial Group are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency.